close to having to go to the third backup once, and never again will put ourselves in the position of having to go to the very last backup.
Oh my goodness.
Well, that's the danger of doing this live, right? Because sometimes the sound settings on my side didn't work. Sometimes the connectivity issues.
Yep.
So that's why we have a backup also of the Zoom, so then we can still edit and provide a very quality version to the viewers slash listeners. But no, so the first couple of minutes we're getting connected. As always, we just give people a chance to connect, and also the streaming services to connect.
Yep. And I'm showing.
Give me 2 seconds. I got to go put my dog up. Hang on.
No
Give
problem.
me 1 second.
So welcome everyone. As you can see, we're coming in. If it's the first time watching the Manufacturing Hub, the first couple of minutes are what I call community comments, and we actually have a lot of very good, interesting community comments. First stop is we get to embarrass Vlad for the first time today. As you guys may or may not know, he has a very popular YouTube channel called Solus PLC. Hey, to the potential 26,000 people watching on Solus PLC. I say that with my shtick of, if you guys have somehow not subscribed to Solus, please go ahead and do that to go ahead and help Vlad out. I joke the only thing that this show is missing is the silver play button over that ever-growing spaghetti mess of wires above Vlad's head. So please go ahead and hit the subscribe button for that. And while we're talking about YouTube channels, I actually have 2 other announcements. You guys can also find Manufacturing Hub on YouTube. That's where we're going to put all the clips of this video. So if you want to see quick 2-3 minute segments, please go ahead and subscribe to that. And then third, we very rarely have 3 YouTube related comments. So third YouTube related comment is Tim Wilborn is going live this Friday on the TW Controls channel. And if you guys are not subscribed to the TW Controls channel, you're missing out. There'll be some days where I'm like, I scroll through my YouTube and I'm like, I need something to watch. And there was one day within the last week that Tim literally pushed out like 20 videos all in a row. And I don't know if it was intentional or not, but I think it was just a whole bunch of, a very great video series that Tim pushed out. And I'm just shocked that he can find time to do, controls work or training or build trainers or all of those other things in between building this. A couple of more event announcements. So Frank Lamb, as you guys know, he does a Mastering the Machine series. I saw earlier today that the Mastering the Machine will be out on this coming Saturday. No link as of yet to that Zoom call. So if you want to hang out and drink some coffee with Frank on Saturday morning, please go ahead and do that. And then we actually have a upcoming event, right? So our first 2022 mostly confirmed event of the year is with our guest today, Bob. So BrewLogix, if you guys follow the show, Bobby Cole was on episode 37, and we talked about the BrewLogix event as what they're doing for marketing and how it's fun, and the concept of going to a small brewery and hanging out and talking about tech and getting to talk to other people who have tech. Well, not only is Bobby going to be there sometime in February 2022 in Raleigh, but Bob here is going to be there in 2022, and our friends at Eco. So if you guys don't know Chris Granger and the Eco Asks Why podcast, I think he just launched episode 175. I don't know when that man has time to sleep or do his actual job, because he's not a professional podcaster. You guys should follow the Eco Ask Why podcast. Chris will have that coming out. And then as we have confirmations coming out, we will also go ahead and make that announcement as we come closer to February. Beyond that, again, this is actually the conclusion of our theme talking about emerging technologies. We want to thank Siemens for sponsoring this theme. We want to thank Siemens for sponsoring this theme and all of their support for the show. We'll talk a little bit more about, I guess, another event, another confirmed 2022 event later in the show with them. And speaking of Siemens, Vlad and I, the Manufacturing Hub, are running a Siemens giveaway. We've got some Somatic software. Say that 5 times fast, guys. So we've got a Simatic software package. You guys can go ahead and check that all out at manufacturinghub.live/Siemens-giveaway, where we'll have all of that information, and we'll go ahead and make sure that we drop links in the chat below. Thank you to everyone that has already entered. Vlad and I will be doing a drawing. I believe we agreed the first show of the year, we will be doing that drawing. And if you somehow managed to listen through all of this before the show, thank you guys so much. As we are now on episode 41 and are like semi-professional at this, we need to remind you to like and share and comment on LinkedIn and YouTube and all of your normal podcast platforms. If you're on LinkedIn, please like and follow the Manufacturing Hub with Vlad and I. And beyond that, just a reminder, if you have somehow not managed to grasp all of this information and are ready for the show, you can find everything online at manufacturinghub.live. Vlad, before I jump in and we talk about Bob, is there anything that I've missed?
No, that was a very thorough introduction, Dave. Thank you for that.
That's good, because I read basically the entirety of the internet in those 3 minutes. So everyone, without further ado, welcome to Manufacturing Hub with me, Dave, and this guy down here, Vlad. We have made it to episode 41 of the Emerging Technologies in Manufacturing theme, and we have a very special guest to finish us out on this theme, Bob Meads of IQ Agent. So, Bob, we'd like to welcome you to the show. Thank you for being here.
Hi, thanks a lot, David. I'm really excited, as we talked last week, about being here and meeting you guys and Vlad. So, I'm excited.
No, perfect. So, but before as everyone knows, we'll have Bob talk about, what he does, and specifically in the augmented reality and virtual reality space. But as I was reminiscing with Bob, I was joking about the first time Bob and I met. So this was probably 5 years ago, and we were at a small brewery at a co-branded Siemens event out in Reno, Nevada. And Bob had flown out from Atlanta. I think I had come in from Buffalo, and we had never met before. And here was the man with the most amazing technology I had ever seen. So he was the first person I had ever met who had an iPad Pro. And he liked to joke that he had to convince his wife that it was an appropriate business expense to get an iPad Pro. But so he had like the first iPad Pro. And then he comes in and he's talking about augmented reality and virtual reality. And I'm thinking to myself, I think that this is still a few years away. But then something amazing happened. Then he pulled out the Microsoft HoloLens, and for some reason, as most everyone at the bar was already drinking, allowed us all to like put it on and experience IQ Agent that we'll talk about in real life. And it was amazing when you put it on, but it was also the best bar trick in the world, because it was one at a time, and everyone who put it on looked like complete idiots trying to tell it to do something. And I know I had to repeat the request 5 times in a row, and like I'm trying to point and poke at it. Needless to say, it is indelibly etched in my memory, and so is Bob. And that was kind of very much my first hands-on steps of, hey, this is actually going to be something, and it may take a little while, but augmented reality is going to change the face of manufacturing. So yeah, welcome, Bob. Can you give everyone a little bit more of a background of how you've gotten here and how you got into augmented reality, please?
Absolutely. And Dave, thank you for that. I remember that day and night very well. We had people from the automotive industry and manufacturing and controls engineers. And it's one thing to talk about augmented reality, but to see it in the context, especially of the HoloLens, because it's immersive, is really what gets people excited. But my background is kind of varied. I was Navy submarines for about 7 years. I was an electronics technician. I got out. I went to work in a production plant here in Georgia at NEC Technologies. I was a production engineer. We made computer monitors. We made CD-ROM drives, which were brand new back in the 90s. And then I went to work for Siemens. And I was very interested in driver development and integrating hardware and software back then. And I wanted to work with drivers and things like that. So I got to work with their SCADA product, WinCC, which I fell in love with, and I still work with WinCC, even to this day. And Siemens is a great friend to me, as well as customer. And after I left Siemens, I started a company, and it was really around WinCC and controls consulting. I met my business partner, Pat Meir, who I brought on, and he and I did some software development together. But things kind of changed. I saw development for new technologies kind of picking up. And when the iPad 2 came out, because the iPad 1 didn't even have a camera, but when the iPad 2 came out back in 2011, Pat and I were looking at the iPad 2, and we're trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to get this on the plant floor, and what are we going to do with it? And we were batting around ideas, but it occurred to me that every idea we had was already out there. It was just on a computer. Hey, let's make a SCADA client. Well, there's many SCADA clients. Okay, so now you can walk around. I can do that with a laptop, and let's make a database interface, and let's do whatever. And so, and I like to joke, and it's partly true, that I came up with the idea for IQ Agent one Saturday morning when I was doing, what most Georgia guys do on Saturday morning. I was cleaning my shotgun and watching The Matrix. And it occurred to me that I wanted to look through this iPad device at the plant, and when it passed a piece of equipment, it would pop up relevant information about that equipment. And first thing came to my mind was PLC information, but then later, it was drawings and schematics and stuff like that. And so that's where the concept that was born. And this is 2011. So immediately hired a developer. We started the patent process, which we do have a patent, and we came up with a lot of different technologies about how to do just that. And I looked at object recognition and dead reckoning and things like that. But we came up with the idea of a QR code because it's deterministic. It doesn't cost anything. And that's kind of how it took off. And then once we did the iPad, then later, we had demand for Android. And then, of course, the Hololens came along. The RealWear HMT head-mounted tablet, also came along. But that's kind of where it was born. And so, our first customer was in 2012. So we'll be 10 years old in just a month or two. But that's kind of how it all started.
That's a very interesting introduction, Bob. I think, I have several questions that I would like you to expand on, but a very interesting, I guess, fact based on your background, because I think we've had several people that went through the Navy as, technicians on a sub. So I'm thinking that has been a very, interesting experience in itself. So I know it's Sean Terrell, and I believe we had a few others, Dave. I don't know if you remember the names, but it seems like a very, I guess, interesting path. And I would assume that it has probably led to many experiences that you can draw from in terms of, work ethic and just general, I would say, drive to work on some of these technological advancements. But yeah, go aahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've actually met a lot of controls engineers that are ex-submariners. Mm-hmm. We're proud of our Dolphins, which is the warfare pin that you work very, very, very difficult to earn while you're in the Navy. There's several people at Siemens. There was a gentleman named Jonathan Forrester that some of my Siemens friends will remember, who was exceptionally brilliant. But we were trained very hard. It's a very rigorous environment. Mm-hmm. I worked on inertial navigation systems, on the boomers out of Charleston. And just about everything we did was classified. I used to joke, when I got married, when I was on the boats, and I came home one day, and my wife says, "How was your day?" And I said, "That's classified." And then I slept out in the yard that night. So, but I do believe it has something to do with it, because it's a very rigorous environment. You're surrounded by technology. You lend your life, and you depend on technology, because if something goes wrong down below the waves, then you're kind of on your own. So it's a brotherhood. But I do believe that it drives people to really excel and technical and things like that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, again, I would say that technology is in many ways led by a lot of the military applications, and also, I guess, AR, VR, we could say that gaming leads some of that technology as well. But it would be also, I guess, interesting to get your perspective on that as we continue the discussion. But going back to the starting point of where you decided to found the company and found your first engineer, what were your thoughts at the time, right? So this is 2011, you said, and before you got your first customer in 2012, were there any maybe like doubts? Was there a certainty of what you were going to deliver? What was, I would say, if you could paint us a picture of what was playing in your head as you were diving into this technology that was at the time, I would say, like unproven. What were you imagining or thinking at the time?
Well, I'd never really had doubts that that it would be accepted. And even back then, augmented reality was something very, very, very new, and we weren't really thinking augmented reality. We were thinking about applications that would help in the manufacturing. And one of the things that, as I thought about this and I worked, very hard on this technology, was the litmus test of this application would not be, hey, look, this is an augmented reality app. It was, wow, this makes my job a lot easier. This is, it totally, I just lost the word, but it helps me do my job. And then later it's, oh, okay, that was augmented reality. And we were, what we really wanted to do was change the paradigm of how people consume data on the plant floor, because you're tied to an HMI panel, or you're tied to a control room screen, or you're tied to whatever. We wanted to break that tie. And, we felt like mobile applications were going to do that. And this was at a time where you didn't use your cell phone on the plant floor, because they would not allow you to do that, or they were, very strict about it, especially Android phones, because there's a perception that they're less secure than iOS. But we felt like there would be adoption, because we saw that adoption for new technology was being accepted much faster and at an accelerating pace than, before. Because when I first got into Siemens, Windows 95 was out, and Wonderware was born on Windows 95. And then, Windows NT, which is supposed to be the kind of industrialized version of Windows, was starting to kind of gain acceptance and things like that. So we felt like it was going to be accepted. And I felt like it was a matter of time. And I had this idea of this mobile workforce. And my very first customer, which was a global pharmaceutical company, they were doing things like, they bought like 50 iPads, and then they charged their people to go out and say, okay, how do we use these on the plant floor? And so you had these companies that had these, what they call mobility initiatives. Mobility meaning I can walk around with this mobile device. So I knew that it was going to take off, and I knew that it was going to be accepted on the plant floor. And we wanted to deliver the application that was different than other applications. We didn't want an app that you could also have on a PC. The litmus test for IQ Agent was it was worthless if you were on a PC, because its whole innate productivity and worth came from the fact that it's on a mobile device, and I can make your planner a target-rich environment or a data-rich environment just by pointing my mobile device at a piece of equipment and instantly getting all the access. And that decentralizes how you get data, and it starts to kind of move away from the fixed HMI panel and things like that.
And to paint maybe a better picture for the listeners, right? So I've been to several trade shows where there have been demonstrations of, the Rockwell solutions that you would essentially use either like augmented reality goggles or like an iPad, like you've mentioned, and kind of point it at a device. So I believe that the use case in that scenario was like a pump that you could point your iPad on, and then it would provide you certain, like data points. It would say like what's the temperature it's running at, what's the current like volume it's pushing through. But could you maybe explain to us what could be some other use cases for those who haven't, been to a demo? What would you practically be able to do with, let's say, an iPad on the manufacturing floor when it comes to augmented reality?
Well, we work on what you call the point of interest concept. Think of Google Maps for the plant floor. So on Google, you say, hey, show me hotels near me, and it shows you hotels. What we do is we have the point of interest concept, and so in our configuration software, you create a point of interest for anything, a piece of equipment or a part of a piece of equipment or a warehouse shelf or whatever. And then you just drag in information. You can drag in OPC UA data points or DA data points or SQL queries. You can drag in, documents, schematics, videos, training material, and we also have the ability to do workflow and forms. And so you associate all that with the point of interest, print the QR code and put it where you want it. And so then from the iPad app or the HoloLens or whatever, you point it, it finds that QR code, and then we pull up all the information that you have for that piece of equipment. And it can be anything. And the beauty of it is, we didn't want to be tied only to augmented reality. So, we tell people one of the biggest things about augmented reality pilots is they have a certain amount of money, and it's, okay, we're going to spend, X $1,000 on these goggles, and we're going to spend all this, and they're going to end up with an AR demo that works with one person at a time on one piece of equipment, and then they're going to try to get ROI out of it. With us, you can do that. You can buy your HoloLens, you can buy your RealWear, but it'll also work on an iPhone 4. It'll also work on an iPad or an Android phone. So you're going to get, your ROI out of it. But the whole thing is you tie everything back to, your QR code, which you can pull it up on a menu. But the beauty of it is I'm not publishing anything. It is not a custom application. It's off the shelf. So if you go put a few data points in a document, and then somebody says, hey, we just got the new schematics for that, or we just did a training video. You open up the software, drag in the video. Now the next time somebody scans it, boom, the video's there. So it's a live system. And so you can put any electronic content there that you want, and you're limited to 2.14 billion QR codes. After that, I guess you're kind of out of luck. But I think the most that a plant that we've got has been about 9,000. So they had plenty to spare for their equipment. Does that make sense, Vlad?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's a very interesting application. I personally can only see this increasing in popularity, especially again with everyone trying to get this just-in-time information to their workers. And it could be, I personally, I've worked quite a bit in engineering and maintenance, and I could see how if you're troubleshooting something on the line and then you have to go back to the shop just to get a manual, it's going to save you a ton of time. It's but there's absolutely like many different cases for different departments. I think the use cases are going to be very different, right? For someone who works more in operations and needs to, for example, punch in a new recipe into your SCADA system that may not have everything saved. It's a recipe that's produced by your SAP, for example, then displaying that recipe on the either iPad or HoloLens, like you mentioned, could be of extreme value to the operator that's currently working on that system.
Well, that was another kind of gist of what we wanted. We also, wanted IQ Agent to be useful to the different roles out on the plant floor. So you've got your production workers, you got production supervisors, you got your engineers, production engineers, maintenance engineers, you got your supervisors. And so we created use cases for all of those. So for your engineer, think about doing a light test. You got your PLC program. You got to have two people. You got one person, maybe plugged into the PLC, and you got somebody out where the I/O is, and hey, did the light come on? Did the light come off? But with IQ Agent, you can have those points wherever you're at, so you can kind of be around and see that information. But we can, for your production supervisors, they can see, where things are up or down. If you've got an engineer at home, they can pull up the points of interest at home. And for the executives, for your C-suite, one of the cool things is they can pull up the key performance indicators on their phone live at any time. Just by, you don't have to scan the QR code. There's a menu that you can pull up. But if you want to know what your base production is and what your production rate, your count is, even if you're, away at lunch or at home, you can get that information. Mm-hmm. So we don't compete with SCADA, because that's another thing I know from years and years of being in SCADA support and sales is if you compete with SCADA, you're not going to do that. So we extend, exactly like you said, the SCADA that they have. We can extend those data points that they're using. If they're web-based, we can, show information from the SCADA system without kind of stepping on SCADA's toes. So we want to have a use case for virtually anyone in the plant, because that's going to help the ROI. Because at the end of the day, the ROI is what is going to make or break this or any product is the same to the plant floor, because they don't buy glam. They don't buy fluff. They'll look at it and go, wow, that's really cool, and I can do like Dave said and look around and see stuff. But if it doesn't have ROI and if it doesn't solve a real problem, it's not going to sell.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely agree with you. Dave, did you want to?
Yeah, no. So I was going to say, I think Bob's last comments bring up a good point. I've said, for at least most of this year and probably longer, that for me, the most interesting kind of emerging next set of technologies is going to be in this AR, VR technology on the plant floor level. And I've also said that, this is the sort of technology, next generation technology you can implement tomorrow for all of the reasons that Bob has said, is that it's a relatively low cost. You can start with nearly anything that you use. You can go ahead and tag, a machine line. And as James mentioned in the comments, he's taken, PDF manuals and put them on HMIs. I think many of us have, taken those and connected them to HMIs or connected them into the SCADA system. But now, as opposed to having to go into the SCADA system, you can go ahead and empower your engineers, your maintenance staff to go ahead and scan it and immediately have access to the manuals, immediately have access to potentially live data, as opposed to the alternative of walking and spending half an hour going to dig out the manuals from somewhere, or going to get to a computer and then going to find the SCADA system and figure out where they can log in. It's something that you can immediately do. And I think that for me, it's one of the most exciting emerging technologies of how can we leverage the normal technology that we use in everyday day-to-day life at our jobs. I kind of think that it's humorous that we build cars and we build airplanes and we make all of the food that everyone has to eat in order to survive, but the operators go from 2021, where they're on Facebook up until 3 minutes before they get into the plant floor, to like 1997, where let's hope that the mouse works, and if it doesn't work, we have to take it out and pull the roller ball out and blow into it and put the ball back in. For me, it's very funny that so much of the technology that we use and everyone has grown up on or grown accustomed to using just ends when we walk into the plant floor, and this amazing consumer technology like the iPad, as Bob described, are so difficult to go ahead and leverage within the plant floor itself.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, and that's a great point. And I do see that. I do see more adoption, but I still see a lot of plants that are, filling out, paper forms and doing check boxes. And then they go hand it to somebody and they got a stack of these on their desk and they're entering into into Excel. And then somebody else is sucking this into a database. And one of the things that, when I talk to people about IQ Agent, is that it is a digitalization platform for a very low cost. We can do the first step toward getting you to using the mobile devices, because
and as James
we can force you to digitize those documents and organize them. And it's funny because I've had discussions, with actually a pretty big brewing company, that they loved the product. They said, well, we don't have time to organize our documents. Mm-hmm. And I said, guys, you don't have time to not organize your documents, because if you can't find them, then the guy that's got to do the PM, or the guy that's got to do the troubleshooting, or the guy that's got to go find the schematics to order a part, when you really need it, they're not going to be able to find it. But one of the big things, though, cybersecurity comes into this. Most of the big plants that want to use iPads and mobile devices in general, they want these things to be managed. So you got mobile device management, and this adds another layer of complexity. And a lot of companies look at this and they look at it as this, all right, this is this gigantic task, and they don't even want to start. And I think it prevents some of these companies from really taking advantage of mobile technology and AR and things like this, because, it can look like quite a daunting task.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I've had similar experiences in many manufacturing sites as you've described, Bob. I want to follow up on on a couple of technologies that we've mentioned, which are the headsets, because as you've alluded to, you've started in 2011, so all the hardware was not necessarily the same as it is today. So I wanted maybe to get your opinion on what's the current landscape. If you're going into a manufacturing site, what kind of different devices would you see paired with augmented reality? Are there any advantages or drawbacks to like either one?
Well, yeah, there are. And it really depends on the use case. Phones and tablets are great, and most people use these. And that's the big advantage, is that they have these. They're used, and a lot of companies will buy iPads or buy tablets, and they're easily managed and things like that. But the downside is you got to use at least one of your hands, to really view the data. And there's one vendor out there that has an augmented reality version, but it only works on the tablet, and you have to set the tablet down, and that's your use case, which doesn't, kind of doesn't make sense for me. Augmented reality, really, to really realize its full potential, really needs to be hands free. The HoloLens 1 was great. We embraced it when it came out, but that's not really something you're going to have someone working 8 hours in. And even Microsoft said that it wasn't fully safety rated. It was big. The battery life, wasn't great when you're, kind of running these things. HoloLens 2 is better. I think that the big advantage right now goes to RealWear, head-mounted tablet one. When I first saw them, I have to be honest with you, I wasn't impressed. It was a monocle, and I was thinking, okay, well, I don't know about that. But when I first kind of played around with it, and the big thing is you got to put it on a bump cap, or you got to put it on a hardware hat, because that makes it stable. If you just slap it on your head and you're moving your head and it's kind of jangling around, it's kind of hard to get situated. But once you get used to it and it kind of sits below your eye, then it's good because you're hands free and you can go around. And with IQ Agent, you can pull up information and you can do things. And there's quite a few of my customers are using at least a couple head-mounted tablets. There's been a lot of headgear that hasn't made it out, and they were kind of targeted toward manufacturing. But the thing about manufacturing is you got to pay attention to what they're doing. If you've got a physical tether, that's an okie dokie for most manufacturing plants, because you can't have a wedding ring, you can't have a bracelet, you can't have a necklace. And if you do, I don't care if it's under your clothes or if it's a breakaway, it's just not going to happen. So the wearables that don't have that are going to have the advantage. I think, the HMT1 is probably the most practical. Vuzix has got some nice stuff out there, but it is tethered. Some are, wirelessly tethered back to, mobile device. The HoloLens 2 is not, and it is a very nice unit, but the suites that come with the software and everything like that, it's kind of hard to buy like 10 or 15 or 5 dozen of those things, because it's a pretty big thing. And there's a lot of development that goes into that. So mostly what I've been seeing in America, it's iPads and HMT ones, and then a smattering of kind of the others, and then the labs will have the HoloLens. In Europe, it is Android devices. I've got some resellers over in Europe, and they've been kind of beating on me to get an Android tablet version, which is kind of tough because I don't have pressure here in the U.S. for that. I have pressure, more for the, for the tablet based. But there's a lot of vendors coming online. You've got Third Eye, and you've got, there's a lot of medical devices that are coming out, and people are seeing that augmented reality for manufacturers is a lot better bet than Pokemon Go and games, which are very cool, and you've got wide acceptance. But manufacturing, those people have money, and those people will spend it once you get to it. So I think over the next year and 18 months, there's going to be even more head-mounted stuff coming out. I think RealWear has actually come out. I don't know if it's new hardware yet, but they call it Explorer, and I just got an email about it. I got to go look at it. But I think over the next 18 months, you're going to see even more coming out as development comes. And the one I'm waiting on is Apple. They have, there's been a lot of hype. They're going to come out with something. And I know this from just like many different fronts. The question is, number one, is it going to be manufacturing friendly? Are they going to tether it to an iPhone? I think they probably will, which is going to really hurt them. But maybe they won't. I love Apple products and everything, but they tend to not really focus on manufacturing at all. And I wish they would, but that's the one I think everybody's kind of looking at. And I've seen also that I think Google has said that they're going to be coming out with something, but again, I don't know if it's going to have a manufacturing context.
And that's 2022, right? Time frame, if I'm not mistaken, for the
for
headset
Apple.
Yeah.
For Apple, they have said 20. I've heard 2022, and I've heard 2023. Okay. I do know that it's been a couple of years. They bought a lens manufacturer. They bought was it Med.io? They bought a lot of stuff. And as an iOS developer, when you get some of these new beta releases, you see these cryptic comments that look like they kind of allude back to gestures and and things like that, which the current the current AR libraries don't support that yet. Something's up. Tim Cook is not returning my calls, even though I am an Auburn fan. So I guess I'm gonna have to wait for the rest of the world, to find out what they're doing. Tim, if you're listening, send me an email.
Tim, if you're listening, send all of us an email. We would love to come to the mothership for a live show.
That's exactly right.
But I would agree with your assessments on there, Bob. And I would say, to be fair to Apple as a whole, kind of everything that they've developed in the last 2 or 3 years have gone much back to their pro and prosumer roots. And I think with the Mac Pro a couple of years ago that came out, and then with all of the M1 chips that have come out, their own silicon, I think that may be we need to create our own silicon so that we can then go ahead and leverage that in our glasses. And I'm personally really happy that they didn't put like an A15 chip or an A16 chip in glasses, and then we all run out to buy them, and then they come out with the M1 chip, and then we are like, well, now we have to go buy these because no one wants, yes. And so I think that could be on the horizon. I would also say that to kick off this, we had Jeff Winter, and he's newly with Microsoft, and I'm excited with what Microsoft is doing. As a whole within the manufacturing space, it seems like they kind of like all of the major companies are more focused, more pushing, and they realize that manufacturing could be a good, opportunity for them to increase business. So I think that there is lots of hope that the tech leaders of, the last 2 decades are paying more attention to what we're doing. And I think, Vlad, many of the people listening to this are probably putting themselves in a good position to embrace some of this new technology, even if it takes another 5 years to get onto the plant floor.
Right. And it's, I agree. And we have an AR version of IQ Agent for that, for supporting iOS devices. And it's really nice. We use the QR code for an anchor. And then you can, break out your point of interest, like your data points, and place them around the machine. It's live, you can author a point in seconds, and then everybody can see it. But I always tell people when I show them this, they say, man, that is the coolest thing. I can't wait to get this on my plant floor. And I said, okay, but wait a minute. Your hands are going to be encumbered when you use this. And they always say, well, why did you build it? And I said, I built it to be ready for glasses. Mm-hmm. Now, I built it so that I could very easily, just like I showed you the Hololens in a bar several years ago, if I can show you this on an iPad and you have this great AR scene that I can create in mere moments, and it can be shared, and yet people see how easy that is to do, then it's very easy to imagine seeing that on glasses. And so, the hands-free aspect for AR is where the promise is, in my opinion, for manufacturing. And manufacturing is the perfect place for augmented reality. It really is, and I could probably talk for days on it. But I think Microsoft has led. I think they'll continue to lead. I think there's some things that I wish they would consider, and I wish some other companies would get in, kind of get in on it. But the HoloLens is brilliant, and I hope they continue. I share your optimism.
I really liked your answer, Bob. I wanted to follow up a little bit, and you've already mentioned some of these points. But what does the, I guess, transition from an iPad, or just, I guess, the training process in general for you look like? So let's say you're going to a new facility and you're looking to train up some, managers and probably supervisors as well as operators on how to use your system, or let's say augmented reality in general. And let's say the facility has bought everybody a HoloLens, so they've all got these goggles. Obviously, you can show them on an iPad, but what is the transition, and I guess the feedback or the first impressions that you get? Is it complicated for people? Is it very easy? How is the navigation, I guess, when you want to, again, if you're looking at a pump and you want to pull up some of these documents, how does it look to them on, the HoloLens versus the iPad? What are the comments that you're hearing?
Yeah, that's a great question, Vlad. And on the iPad and iPhone, it's really easy because with the assumption that it's just like the SCADA. You get engineers to build the SCADA, and then the operators just use it. So if the SCADA engineer did a pretty good job of setting up the menus, then it's easy to use. With IQ Agent, it's actually easier with these devices because you just say, okay, walk up to the equipment of your choice, launch the app, point it at the equipment, and you're going to see stuff. And so that is, within a moment or two, they get it. With the RealWear headset, it's the same. You just have to say, go into scan mode, look at the QR, and then boom, the information goes there. Now, there's a little bit more training wise with that headset simply because it's hands free, you have to use your voice to navigate rather than your fingers. And so, that is a little bit, I have to say that RealWear has done a pretty bang up job with their voice recognition. And it's pretty good. When you're entering data, you can use phonetics or you can use, free speech and things like that. It works in noisy environments. So there's a little bit more training involved, with that to navigate with your voice. And so usually when I'm training people on it, the whole thing about RealWear is if you have a button that says scan, and you instinctively know that if you could tap that button, it would bring up a scan window. But with RealWear, instead of tapping it, you just say scan, and then it will translate that into that command, and then you can do it. Now with HoloLens, it's very similar, but you can use QR codes with HoloLens, and what you have to do is you use a voice command, scan code. It'll find the code. But with mixed reality or with real augmented reality, then you have to have what you call a scene. And from a user perspective that is just viewing the information, we're going to assume the scene is created. And then they just have to know how to pull up the scene. So you can pull it up with a menu. And like with the HoloLens, you've got voice commands, show menu, and then you navigate. You can say the words, and then it comes to the POI, and you can pull it up. But with the HoloLens, if you've got your scene created, you've got this big floating point of interest, and then you can just place your cursor on that, and basically use a voice command to open up the point of interest. And then you've got a pointer, and you have to just kind of move your head and go, get the pointer, and then you can use the tapper or something like that. So they kind of had a merged system where you're using both your gaze, a little dot, and then you've got your gesture. So you've got gestures to open up a POI, tap a button, close a POI. And then you've got your pointer where you just put it on the control and use your clicker or say something. So there's a little bit more training there, for our system in order to use it. But I will tell you that, Dave's story at the first of the show, they all learned to interact with it, very quickly under the influence of some alcohol, maybe one or two drinks. So it wasn't too bad. It wasn't too bad. With the other, what I call the custom systems, that you find out there on the others, there's varying degrees of difficulty, but I think by and large, augmented reality, if it's designed well, is not really that hard to use. It's just learning, with with goggles, you're not going to be using a keyboard. You're not going to be using your hands. If you are, then they did not design it that well. That gestures are kind of where we need to go. So does that answer kind of what you're looking for?
No, absolutely. I'm very excited to see some of these in real life. Dave has certainly a lot more experience in these applications than I do, but it paints a really good picture. I really appreciate it, Bob.
Oh,
And
cool.
to add what Bob was saying, Bob has let me play on his HoloLens a little bit. I have a set of RealWear goggles that I've used for some like customization of systems, and I've done some work on iPads in the past. And I would say to Bob's point that if the systems are designed well, they should all be exceptionally intuitive. A lot of it is, are you a touch person or are you a voice command people? I know some people who are exceptionally good at navigating within RealWear. I am absolutely not one of those people. It takes me like an hour. It takes me an hour every time I go to start working on it to remember all of the commands. But I think once you are regularly working on it, if you can get over kind of that relatively small screen, that relatively small, hands-free tablet, then it works very well straightforward. I would also like to say that I haven't used any, but I've seen some concepts of some like wrist-mounted tablets. I think they're generally Android, but I imagine you could probably put like one of the new iPad minis on there. And for me, if I was looking to design a system, I would look really hard at those because I think it gives you the flexibility of going ahead and touching and typing as you would normally, while it also gives you the ability to use the voice and everything else. So I think the wrist-mounted tablets for me are some of the most exciting opportunities to get started, even if I've never seen one in use. And so I'm very excited to continue this conversation, Bob. But first, we have to thank our sponsors, which means I have to ask Vlad for his awkward laugh so I can do the ad read.
Okay.
You'd think at some point he'd actually make he'd make an ad, but he hasn't yet. Yeah, that's what he keeps saying. But no. So again, we'd like to thank Siemens for sponsoring this theme and continuing to support us at Manu. With that, more than 3,500 2022 inside Ford Field. That's on March 23rd and 24th. And as I said last week, don't worry, Ford Field is domed. They're not insane like the people in upstate New York who want to build a new stadium without a dome. But there we're going to learn about the newest technologies, share best practices and ideas, and be part of advancing the future of manufacturing. So this is an in-person event, and they're calling it #MIA22. It's free to attend, but registration is required to take part in the Thought Leadership Summit. Over 100 seminars and over 50 exhibits focused on digitalization, automation, controls, and drive technologies. With that, I know Vlad and I and a few other people are working on figuring out how exactly we can get there, and we're hopeful to be able to do more of this style show there and pull in a bunch of information from everyone else. So we will go ahead and drop the link to that. We'll go ahead and drop the link to that in the comments below. Again, thank you to Siemens, and we hope to see at least a couple of you out there. Yes, we hope to see at least a couple of you out there in Detroit next year. Boom. So I like this. I think that I want to touch on a couple of struggles, right? So anyone looking to implement emerging technologies are going to find struggles. And I know Bob and I have like the third hour of our conversation last week, we were sharing some like war struggles, right? Because while this is like one of the best technologies that you could implement in theory tomorrow, it's not for everyone, right? Like, and I know, so Bob, do you want to share a couple of the struggles that you found, either like the type of organization or like the physical hardware? Like if you don't have Wi-Fi across the plant, this is not a good solution for you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And in 10 years, I've seen and heard quite a bit. Not having wireless is a no-go. Usually when I'm talking to customers, I'll ask, hey, are you using mobile devices on the plant floor? Do you want to Do you have wireless? Do you have good coverage and things like that? You don't have to have complete coverage, but do you have good coverage? And that's kind of one of them. The first struggle that I encountered with my very first customer is it took 6 months to get IT to let iPads on their plant network. iPads were brand new. They had just bought a whole bunch of them, but IT, didn't want to do it. And so the person that I worked with kind of set up something, on his own in a lab to allow people to come in and see it. And his strategy was to get production and engineering and maintenance and the executive suite on board for this so hard that they would gang up on IT and make them push it through. And it still took 6 months, but they did that. And of course, IT, it's their job to be the wardens. They have to be like that. Security, for manufacturing plants, is pretty big, and so they have to, take that stance. Somebody's got to take that stance, and so they get kind of a hard rap there. So having that wireless coverage and things like that. Now, we do have like our forms capability and workflow capability. They do work offline. We do have an IQ agent offline, for field service or areas of the plant. But another struggle is just kind of what we touched on earlier, where I've got all this work that I got to do to get prepared, and it's usually around organizing their documents and organizing their stuff. But the thing is, you're never, ever going to grow. You're never going to be able to take advantage of digitalization if you don't have these resources organized. And, there's been a lot of studies how much a single piece of paper costs manufacturing plants in a year. And it could be a schematic that people have to check out, or it could be, if you think about a paper form, and you got people running around the plants filling out a paper form, and somebody, one person doesn't write that well, and so it's going to waste time trying to figure out what this person was trying to say, or they make a mistake, or they don't fill something out, which that happens all the time. So if you have an electronic form, then you can really mitigate those risks. They're typing, or they're using text input or speech input, or they're selecting from drop downs. You don't have a problem reading that, and you can force them to fill everything out. With our forms, I can embed a video, because another thing is, they go to the form, they don't know how to do that step. You can embed a video in that step. Hey, watch the video. It's going to show you how to do it. So you can actually have people at a lower experience level performing at a higher level, because we're using electronic resources and we're using forms, or you're giving them, instead of going to look for a document. One of the big use cases for our first customer was they were FDA regulated. And once they started using IQ Agent, they never took a hit for the wrong version of a manual being on a workstation, because usually they'd have one stuffed in a drawer. Well, guess what? FDA is going to find that. If it's anywhere, they're going to find it. And so, convincing companies that you need to spend this time. And usually the approach that I take is, you don't have to eat the entire elephant at once. Take your 10 most requested, most important documents, and we can do those in an hour. And then let's get the iPads out there. Let's get those 10 things out there. Let's get those 10 operators using it. Let them be the evangelist. Hey, that was great. I just scanned it, pulled up the document, filled out a form. I was done. They talk about it in the lunchroom, or, whatever. Next thing you know, other people want to use it. And then you do the next 10 most critical and the next 10 most critical. So you don't have to do it all right now. Just, do the 10% that is going to make the most impact. And another barrier, and this is the big one, is with augmented reality, and you've got something on your face, and you're in, and you're in a plant. One of the biggest things is, if you get distracted by something, or you've got this headset on and your peripheral vision, there's been AR and VR, AR headsets out there that block your peripheral vision. You can't do that on a plant floor. you can't see the forklift coming. That's another thing that they really have to pay attention to. But there's the safety factor, and it's very real. And that's something that's got to be mitigated. So, I think the first couple where you've just got to do the work, and you've got to have your documentation organized and stuff like that. That's work that you have to do, and it's going to pay off in orders of magnitude once you get it done, and you don't have to do it all at once. And we can help you do it. There's a lot of integrators be happy to help you do it. But you just kind of have to get past that. There is an initial cost depending on the platform that you buy, and you can start low and kind of go high. But those are really some of the pushback that I've had. That's probably 90% of the pushback is those things right there. And we've done a pretty good job of mitigating it, but sometimes you just kind of got to let it sit and let them kind of gel and marinate in the technology and let them see what other people are doing, and they start to come around.
And
So I
go ahead, Dave. I did
I was
have a
gonna
comment,
say,
but